A warm welcome and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see that the resilience of the audience is quite amazing, because I think we've had very few casualties for the past few sessions, and well done to all of you who have stayed here thus far. We are gathered here and we only have half an hour, so I will try to avoid dragging on for too long, but I must say I look at the title and the world according to Germany. I would never have thought that as a Frenchman I would end up on stage asking that question, but let's go for that. Challenge accepted. So I will, if I were to go through the CV of our two distinguished speakers, I think half an hour would not be long enough, so I will not do that, but I will just say I have a 3-star general and a 3-star diplomat, both retired in a way, not entirely, insofar as they've kept their acute eye, but they have that kind of freedom that they can now enjoy to be more critical towards what they see. Join with me General Ben Hodges, 3-star general, who actually lives in Germany, so that will be an interesting perspective. You served as commanding general of the US Army in Europe from 2014 to 2018, and you held senior positions in Iraq and Afghanistan, and also served as the first commander of NATO's Allied Land Command. And with me today, Ambassador Rainer Rudolph, who serves as the vice chairman of the Munich Security Conference, and held many senior positions in Washington, Brussels, Warsaw, and Vienna until last year as deputy head of mission. And of course, I can't forget that you also worked at the Federal Chancellery with many different hats, including head of the division for EU external relations, Brexit, and the portfolio was quite a large one. So,
and I'm not retired, by the way. I'm still an active diplomat. But
so I'd like to start with the first question, and turning to you, Ambassador. I just stressed that you worked in very different cities, so you've seen very different perceptions of your country, different continents. How have you seen the perception of Germany evolve from one city to the other across the years? I would say since, say, 1989, but that's an arbitrary date.
Well, I guess the easier answer would be always critical, but I guess that just comes with the territory. When we're a country in the middle of Europe, 9 neighboring countries, 8 of them are EU member states. So we have relations with all of them, and that's not always easy. But we work them and sort of working with our neighbors and working with alliances across the Atlantic, obviously. It's our diplomatic DNA, if you like. That's what we're working with all the time. And we may get to what changed the last 2 years in a second, but that's fundamentally what German foreign policy is, and that hasn't changed.
So you've just mentioned change of strategy, what we've been calling Zeitenwende, and I turn to you, General. Has somehow Germany come to terms with its own geopolitical identity? And I would open up and ask you, what's your take on Zeitenwende, not just what it meant when it was announced, but how it's delivered or not?
So Germany, obviously an essential ally for the United States because of its geography, because of its economic power, its potential military power, and also sort of a moral authority that Germany has earned over the last 80 years. So Germany gives the United States unbelievable access. You know, what we have from the U.S. Air Force in Europe, U.S. Army in Europe, U.S. European Command, our hospital. It's essential for American strategic interests. But the answer is no. Germany has not come to terms with who they are. I say this as an American that lives in Germany for the past 6 years. They seem not to have self-confidence, unless we're talking about football, of course, and this off the charts. But in terms of their role in the world, the willingness to use power, they seem very, very unsure, worried about how others will perceive them. And I think it's probably another generation before they really finally come to grips with that.
If I may answer immediately, I'm not that critical of my own country, if I might say so. Look, so much has changed over those last 2 years. And you mentioned the word Zeitenwende. It is often now interpreted as sort of the program that needs to be implemented. But originally, what Chancellor Scholz said in his speech a few days after the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine was, we observe, it's usually translated as watershed moments. So we observe a rupture, and everything that follows is sort of what we sort of take from that as what we need to do. And essentially, it means where we are now is not where we were before. This is not a crisis as a temporary thing, you know, and then you go back to normal, but it's really a rupture, and we're heading towards a new situation. And together, I would say we're working on shaping that. And I would argue, and we can go through a couple of points later on, you know, a lot has changed, and we're doing quite a lot to implement that.
I agree with everything the ambassador just said. I agree with everything you just said. It's not like it was even 2 years ago. But my point is, it's not where it could be and should be, given the economic power, the moral authority, the military potential that it has. I mean, Germany was the first country to deploy troops for the Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group. I mean, I could feel it after the NATO summit in Warsaw in 2016, when Germany said, we will go to Lithuania. You could hear all the other European countries, oh shit, the Germans are doing it, now we have to do it. So, I mean, that was an example of German leadership. And this brigade, the Brigade Litauen that's going to be there, will be the biggest, best brigade in all of the eastern flank of NATO units. My point is, Germans brag about being the #2 contributor to Ukraine. That doesn't matter. Where you are in the rank of who gave what is absolutely irrelevant, just like it's irrelevant that the United States has provided the most. It doesn't matter. What matters is, how are we doing on helping Ukraine get what they need to win? And it looks to me that Germany continues to, because of US failure, Germany is willing to use that perhaps, or the Bundeskanzler is, to not provide tourists because the Americans are not providing attack. And I think Germany will be the biggest loser if Ukraine fails and Russia conquers Ukraine or gets some kind of settlement. Germany will be the biggest loser because there will be millions of Ukrainians heading west, all coming to Germany. And the loss of Ukraine, what it means in terms of economic potential, military potential, diplomatic power, I think Germany will end up paying a massive price for this. That's what I mean. I think Germany could do more despite American failure.
I mean, we all have in mind the phrase of Henry Kissinger, poor old Germany, too big for Europe, too small for the world. Is it something and the conclusion would be too big for Europe, but they don't do anything out of it? Do I translate that correctly? I know the ambassador would not agree, but...
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite...
Too big for Europe, too small for the world.
Oh, it sounds clever, probably...
It's Kissinger, it sounds clever.
If you're in an ambassadorial function, perhaps. Germany ought to be a permanent member of the Security Council. I mean, they're far more reliable and trustworthy than is one of the current 5, Russia. So I think that our German allies are going to have to come to grips with nuclear power. And I don't mean the kind that keeps the lights on. I'm talking about the kind, if they cannot count on the United States, and if France is not going to be able to extend its, or not willing to extend its nuclear shield, then Germany will have to come to grips with that.
Look, if you're asking for leadership, thank you for mentioning what we're delivering in terms of weapons supplies. I think it is substantial. I think it does help. I think the Ukrainians, from what we hear, do recognize it. But it's more than that. Look, take EU accession, for example. 3 years ago, EU accession of Ukraine was simply not being discussed, honestly. We had with Ukraine and 5 other Eastern European countries, Belarus, one of them, we were in a relationship called Eastern Partnership. It was meant to create a relationship with those Eastern European countries, but if we're honest, it wasn't meant to lead towards EU membership, unlike the 6 Western Balkan countries. And now here we are, 3 years later, in a situation that was also unimaginable 3 years ago. We just opened accession negotiations with Ukraine. And I don't know, how long they will, and with Moldova, obviously, also. So I don't know how long they will take, but if you're looking for leadership and sort of reshaping Europe, and also giving an answer to Putin, he would want to deny Ukraine's future in Europe, and we're actively working towards that.
I'd like to bounce back on that. We've just heard Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya said that there have been red lines after red lines, and the democratic world has not really made anything out of it. And so that has sent a signal to Putin, which is actually something that you, General, have stressed several times. Germany has been a leader in the art of compromise. In many senses, for good, and in some cases, some have pointed out that this can't work with someone like Putin. Would you say that? I mean, have you sensed that? Yes, as a senior diplomat in both Washington and Brussels.
No one in Germany is working for a compromise with Putin right now. I mean, we're firmly in the camp of those who are supporting
one year ago in Brussels, in Berlin, you would hear some not necessarily sitting in the current coalition, but actually including in the Chancellor's party, by the way, saying that we need to think about potentially sitting around the table, and the priority should not be sending weapons, but mostly sit around the table and crack a kind of deal.
I mean, that's maybe for the audience, that's a parliamentary debate we had maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's not government policy, really. I mean, if you look across the 3 coalition partners in German government, they are firmly behind support for Ukraine. So I wouldn't put too much into that.
Then if we look at what President Macron said, one of the Macronite comments some weeks ago, saying that the boots option was not excluded. It was met with tepid, let's say, reactions in Berlin. But this is something, General, you said, look, this should not be excluded. The blurrier the lines, the better when the enemy has the psychology of Putin.
Well, I thought it was brilliant what President Macron said. Even if he never intended to send a single French soldier into Ukraine, not one baguette go into Ukraine, the fact is now the Russians have to worry about it. It gets them on the back foot. And I mean, every military theory, philosopher, doctrine, principles of war talks about initiative, get the initiative. And instead, we have been sitting back, wringing our hands, crying about what Russia might do for the last, since they invaded Georgia. And that's why we've done nothing, not really nothing. And so they will just continue going on. So now here's President Macron says, well, I don't think that the option of French troops going into Ukraine should be taken off the table. He's exactly right. I thought it was a mistake when my president, just before the Russian invasion in 2022, said, no boots on the ground. Come right in. I mean, that's an invitation. So you wouldn't do this in football. You wouldn't do this in any competition. Why would you tell the enemy, don't worry, we're not going to do this? So I thought he was right to do it, and I think it was not an idle thing either. I think he's thinking through what might that be, and I think other European countries are realizing if the United States fails to help Ukraine, that for their own security, they will have to go into Ukraine. They can't just sit there on the border and hope that Russia runs out of gas before they get to Poland or Moldova or something like that.
Ambassador, would you say that those comments have opened a Pandora's box in a somewhat healthy way, insofar as that it's broken a taboo, or would you say that it's just playing with fire?
Look, there is no discussion in Germany along the lines of which President Macron opened, and there won't be. The government has been fairly clear on that. What I sort of regretted, not about the comments really, but it's about the situation that then followed, the discussion that followed was a sort of a distraction from all the unity, the amazing unity I thought the EU achieved in response to Russia's aggression over the last 2.5 years. We passed 13 sanctions packages, and just as an aside, that's not that easy because sanctions means that every member state, it's always unanimous. Every member state has something at stake, so it's really hard work behind the scenes. We used EU funding to buy, through an instrument called European Peace Facility, to spend billions of euros to provide arms to Ukraine. An instrument that was envisaged for something completely different, and we worked and we sort of resupplied it with funds several times. So I think we achieved a lot, and it also, in response to the Russian aggression, it would be much more helpful to sort of signal that unity rather than showcase where we might disagree.
That's the kind of compromise. The word might have been ill-chosen, but I was referring to. So the focus would be on building coalitions behind the scenes rather than go the confrontational way?
And look, this coalition building, it's hard work. I mentioned Europe. You could take the global coalition building. We've also been, I think, fairly successful at. There were 2 votes in the UN General Assembly in 2022 with something like 140, 145, I forget the exact figure, member states of the UN condemning the Russian aggression. That didn't came about by just putting it on the agenda. It was months of hard work by all our diplomats around the world, and you know, all our embassies were out there working on it. So yes, it's what we work for, sort of work for unity in the face of the aggressor, and we could find many examples where we aren't there yet, obviously. But so it's work in progress.
General, did you sense when you were interacting with German counterparts that you heard from your counterparts things they could not say out loud, or you might have found or sensed a kind of gap between what political leaders would say and what your counterparts would say off the record?
Well, first, if I may congratulate the German foreign minister and the foreign ministry, Ms. Baerbock. I mean, she is worth like 3 Panzer divisions herself. I mean, she really is a powerful and effective representative leader of German diplomacy. So I acknowledge the hard work that you talked about. Well, look, the Bundeswehr is loaded with very talented, very good, high-quality officers, as they've always been. And they're professional enough that they would never publicly say or do something that was counter to what the civilian leadership has said. Of course, just like in every army, soldiers will complain that, hey, we need more of this, or I wish this, or whatever. But I never heard or saw anything that worried me like, wow, they have a real problem, any more than what I heard anywhere else. Of course, these women and men of the German Bundeswehr, very proud. It's humiliating for them when they hear people talk about, oh, what happened to us, you know, none of our submarines. I mean, when you think of engineering, the first thing that comes to your mind is Germany. So the idea that German equipment might have a problem, that's not because the officers of the Bundeswehr forgot how to do maintenance on a tank. It's because there was no pressure from the Bundestag or several different Bundeskanzlers to maintain a level of readiness, this Kriegstüchtigkeit. There's no demand for it until now. Well, there's an entire industry, and I don't mean industry like companies, I mean a culture ready to fight tonight that the Bundeswehr had in the Cold War. And the leaders of the Bundeswehr today, General Meis, General Laubenthal, General Breuer, they were lieutenants. So they know how, they remember how to do it, but the civilian population has got to demand it. The Bundestag has got to say, hey, we're spending zillions of euro, you guys need to be ready to fight tonight.
Can I just add one point? You mentioned earlier, General, the brigade we're sending to Lithuania. That's for the German Bundeswehr, it's a huge thing. It's just for context, the Bundeswehr has 8 brigades. We're setting up an additional one for Lithuania. And it's the first time we're doing that. In a way, we're repaying is the wrong word, but we're doing what our allies have been doing in Western Germany for decades, being there to protect us, and we're trying to contribute to security there. And it's an effort, you know, sending 5,000 troops abroad. I mean, you know this, it's new to us. It means 4,000 spouses, 2,000 kids, 2 schools, hundreds of teachers, and that's what we're working on. And I agree, the Bundeswehr staff, they're very dedicated.
So I hear there's an issue with the ambassador's microphone. If we can do something, do you confirm in the audience? Or yes, so there's an issue. Well, that's a consensus. Okay, so consensus on the fact that the ambassador's microphone doesn't work. I'd like to move because we only have 5 minutes left. So of course we keep the, I don't know whether it's the elephant in the room, but
I'll try to speak loud.
China. So because General, you just mentioned Annalena Baerbock, she's been at the forefront of the so-called China strategy that was released last winter in Germany. Something that is extremely interesting in that strategy is that the Indo-Pacific really comes out as a really region of importance for Germany. That would not be surprising for France, but for a country like Germany, it actually is. And for the first time in 2 decades, Germany sent warship deployed. They've joined joint exercises with Australia. I mean, it's interesting to show that there's leadership there that one might not necessarily have expected in the region from Germany.
So China, of course, is watching to see what we do vis-a-vis Ukraine. I mean, that's the most important part of deterrence against China making a terrible miscalculation, is that they see that we, the United States, Germany, Poland, France, UK, and all of our European allies are willing to do whatever it takes to defend sovereignty, international law, freedom of navigation, respect for human rights, that we're serious about that. And it is much easier to do it in Europe than it will be in the Western Pacific. So Germany's contribution to deterring China actually has a lot to do with helping Ukraine defeat Russia. There's a straight, solid black line from that to that. Of course, Germany as a sovereign nation has global interests, and Germany will make decisions of prioritization of where it sends the German Navy, and the German Air Force is going to be in a massive exercise this year, along with the U.S. Air Force, and also the Japanese Air Force, similar to what they did in Europe this year. I mean, a huge exercise. This is very important. This is part of deterrence. It's building relationships, interoperability. So a global power needs global reach. I think we would welcome everything that Germany wants to do in the Indo-Pacific region. For me personally, we need to make sure that Germany needs to make sure that Ukraine defeats Russia. That's the best way to deter China.
Well, you have 1 minute, Ambassador, to comment on that.
Just say d'accord or yes.
Agree. I think our greatest contribution will be in helping Ukraine sort of with this political implication. I totally agree.
And on that, I must say we end the discussion on time. So I'd like to thank our 2 wonderful speakers very, very, very warmly for the discussion. I must say it's a bit frustrating to see such an audience and not be able to take questions. But I see there's actually 1 minute and 20 seconds. Can we do that? Is there one question? No, there's no question. Thank you. Thank you.